you know what? I always struggle because I'm not like a, and now welcome to the show.
You have to though.
I don't.
But you have to.
I don't.
There needs to be a clear editing break to be like,
it.
okay, just in case you ever don't put the B-roll, you need to be like, welcome guys.
Look at you, Miss Editor.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I feel like he wants to say it too, but he loves you. So, but do it so that when you go to all us small fries, when you're up to the big people, there's like clear, concise.
I like that small fries. I am still very much small.
I didn't say that my fries weren't delicious. They're just a small size.
They're different size. Welcome. I have been trying to get this interview with you for, tell the people how long I've been trying to get this in. A long time. So tell me, what made you finally agree?
I decided to say yes. We'll pretend that I'm Shonda Rhimes and I just said say yes.
This is your year of yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, it was just, I don't know. I didn't have a good enough reason to say no. And I tried to be honest.
I stalked you enough, right? I stalked you enough and hunted you down enough and harassed you enough that you said yes. So this is why she's here, because I harassed her. She was like, okay,
it wasn't that bad.
either you're going to get a restraining order on me or you're like, let me just sit down in her chair and get this done, right?
It wasn't that bad. It's just, I don't generally talk a lot about myself. And I knew that is the style of interview that you'd prefer to do. So it was just easier to be like, maybe sometime.
But you don't talk a lot about yourself, which I find which is why I wanted to interview you, because I just think you truly are Black girl magic, like the definition of Black girl magic. I have loved you since I met you for the very first time at your brunch 2 years ago. Yes. And literally, I have the photo of our hug, and I just felt like soul sister. But tell people who don't know why I think you're so magical, who you are, what it is you do.
Boy, the big who you are question, right? Who's Monique? Monique is a multifaceted entrepreneur, mother, daughter, sister, family member, community member. The two businesses I run is one, London Ivy Products, which is a natural and organic skincare, hair care company that also carries African and other textiled head wraps. And then that line is designed to make women of color feel confident, beautiful in their skin and their hair, because most people don't recognize how just the smallest imperfection in their skin allows them to change the way the rest of their day goes on. You wake up with a pimple and all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, like my day is done. Doesn't matter if you can cover it, if you have the biggest meeting in your life, doesn't matter. Once you feel incomplete or imperfect, somehow that changes the way your entire vibe goes. So trying to create a space for them to consistently feel good about themselves is where London Ivy Products comes from. And then a subset of that, which kind of relates, but I keep them as separate entities, is the Black Beauty Brunch, which is where you met me. So this year was its fourth year, its largest. Every year we've consistently grown by adding about 20 people. So we had 177 this year. It is meant to be a safe space for Black women to come, take off their armor, reset, learn, and leave feeling celebrated.
Let's start with talking about the brunch, because like you said, that's where we met.
Yes.
I came to your brunch 2 years ago, and I can tell you, as someone who at that point didn't know you, I was just intrigued by the fact that there was even a Black Beauty Brunch. And like you said, all of the marketing and all of the stuff that I saw on social was exactly that, about really a day of encouraging sisterhood, a day of encouraging self-care. And I didn't know what to expect when I came.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
It was a great thing because it far exceeded any expectations that I had. And so I want you to just talk about the format, because it seems like you're very intentional about what happens during the day, the speakers that you bring in. So tell us about that.
So the format stays the same each year. So that's coming in, leaving enough time for the greeting, the, hey girl, you look good, thank you for coming, look at you, all of that to happen, because once you put enough Black women in a room, it just becomes like the prettiest picture you could ever find. And on top of that, just a love fest of being like, oh, where'd you get that? Where'd you get that? And none of the outside world that we normally live in with like, oh, is that your real hair? Or where did you get that? Or questions about like, oh, your hair is different. And it's like, oh, okay, Julie, like it's not, it looks the same as yesterday, but thanks. Like, and you don't have to deal with any of that. You get to just be in this room where you're just loved. And you know it from the minute you enter is the goal, so that from the person that greets you at the door to the person that greets you to help you organize and find a seat at the tables are designed that way by being the long family style, so that you are, no matter who you're sitting beside, how you're sitting, you're no more than 3 feet away from somebody. So you don't end up being at these large round tables where it's just kind of like, whoever's on either side of you, if you look out and they're personable, great. If not, you're kind of stuck. And it also allows, with our format, any of the introverts to be able to just be in the room, where even if they don't say one word, you at least still have access to about 8 people that you could conceivably speak to at any given point. And going through the rest of the schedule, so now we have all that. You sit down, you get something to eat. Normally buffet style, we try to have at least some portion of Caribbean food in there because I am Jamaican and Guyanese. And then past that, we go into the speakers. That each year is both joy and challenge because I preset exactly what it is I want women to leave with. So going with the Phil's theme of how you feel, but also what you learn. So trying to make it cohesive by finding speakers that relate to each other, but aren't just one topic. And it is a labor of love because it allows me to highlight Black women in our community that aren't traditionally seen. And that's not just from being unimportant, but just from the standpoint of being like, hey, you're so good at this thing, but people don't know it because you do it for your corporate job or you do it over here. But how about we give all these women the opportunity to celebrate you while also learn something from you? So that's been my standpoint in trying to avoid bringing in just a bunch of large name Americans, which is awesome. And I did that for the very first one, bringing someone in. But I was like, most people resonated from the local girls that I also still highlighted that day than they did from the rest of it. And I was like, why isn't that happening? Why doesn't Toronto have more space for the Black women here to just be seen? So.
And that's a really great point that you make about there's so many phenomenal speakers. Actually, I discovered Jam Gamble at your brunch. I'd never met her, heard her speak, and was like, what the heck?
Yes.
She's incredible. All of your speakers, and what I love, like what you said, is that the programming is you come away, A, feeling very embraced, very loved, literally from the moment you walk in, but then B, you learn something. So it's not just I went and I hung out with some beautiful ladies. You actually learn something. I remember, was it the last one where you had the speaker who spoke about like mental health and how to get mental health, and how, especially for us as Black women, it's so hard to find, or to even the stigma of it, which was incredible. And this year you had the woman who spoke about finance and all this. So I always come away having learned something. And what I want to know from you is, it's called Black Beauty Brunch. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about who your target audience is. Is that something that was a challenge for you to decide? No. Because you're effectively very much clearly stating who your audience is.
Yes. No, the naming of it, that there's no second option. It was just, okay, I want to have brunch. Who do I want to be there? Black women. What do I want to think about? Beauty. Black Beauty Brunch. And then it kind of throws people for a loop because some people see the name and they assume it's going to be like a makeup show, or they assume it's going to be about skincare because I also own London products. And it's like, no, it's about the actual woman. So not just about putting things on your face, which most of them all come done up and pretty and beautiful, but just about how do we make sure that you leave here whole, or at least on your journey to being whole, and that general inner beauty. So
how did you get to that place where that was something that's important to you, the whole being whole and feeling whole? Like, what was your journey to get to that?
I would say, well, I can speak to why I did brunch to begin with. As I spoke at this year for the first time, telling people that I have a daughter, but I had her and she was coming up to being a year old, and I was just like, hey, I need to see some other adults. Like, I would like to see and talk to someone that can reply and be in this room and just be surrounded by all the things I missed from university, which is funny because I went to university in North Bay at Nipissing, big up Nipissing University, but that is straight up just a community full of white people. Some white people that had never seen black people outside of the international students were there, and the large majority of the black people that were there were international students. So with that, most of us black people spent a lot of time together. Like all the after school time, parties, everything, we're just always together. And I didn't know it then how much I needed it until I came back, and you would think being in Toronto, I'd be surrounded by it, but it wasn't born under the same necessity in Toronto. So I spent more time with like my family and all that stuff, and lots of black people still, but it wasn't in that same space of like that safe room where we could talk about the fact that we were the only black person in our class and the teacher needed to say some inappropriate word from literature, because at least for a couple of us that had like English minors, it was like, okay, they're reading some text from long ago times and it says something they don't want to say. So they stop and everyone just turns and stares at the black girl. And it's like, if I was not in this room, you wouldn't have hesitated to say that. You would have probably said it twice. So how about we just continue on and stop making this a thing? Or in my actual major of gender equality and social justice, there'd be a lot of conversation about race, and then the expectation that I was supposed to explain all the things that every other black person was thinking for any scenario anywhere.
You're
and it's like, I am not a spokesperson. But then I found, because I was able to say that to people, they then put me in the other side of being the one black person that is an outlier for them, where it's not that Monique is just part of the group of black people that all read and write and do all the things. It became, oh, you're this exceptional black girl. And it's like, it wasn't being said with joy. It was just like, oh, that's Monique. And it's like, oh no, Monique is black still. Like nothing has changed. I can't walk into any room and wipe this off. I am still very much so Monique, the black girl in your class. But I need you to be able to walk through the earth knowing that I am not the exception for you. You don't just have Monique, the black friend. Monique is a black woman that represents the fact that black women are all different. So, yeah.
So where do you see Black Beauty Brunch going, growing? What's your vision for it?
That is interesting. I've been going through that whole process now, especially after this year, trying to formulate exactly what it is that I'd like it to be, because it didn't start from wanting to be anything. It was just, I needed a room to be in with black people, and I thought I'd have 40 people, and then there was 100 people, and I was like, oh, okay, this is the thing. And then after that, all the messages from women being like, oh my gosh, I had such a good time, and this is so great. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess you guys really needed it too. So then here came year 2 and year 3, and every year anyone that knows me in like my regular life here's Monique being like, I'm not doing that again. Like, it's not, no, I'm good, I'll save all my money. Like, I'm okay. And then still, like, I get a message.
It truly is, I mean, I would imagine, as someone who was there, it's relatively inexpensive for what the day is.
Yes.
I would imagine this is not a money-making venture.
Oh, by no means. By no means. It, like, there's a certain amount of money that I used to give to charity that I just allocated to this. And that is the money that is every year set aside to be like, whenever brunch comes around, if it happens, that is the extra. The ticket price gets you to one point, and then Monique takes care of all the extra, the photos and all the pieces that make the extra notch between just coming out to eat with your friends and being able to leave being like, okay, someone cared about me. The curation of the gift bag, making sure those are all branded specific things just for you guys and not just a bag full of pamphlets or a bunch of samples from people. It just...
Even how you curate the vendors.
Yes.
Like, it's all, like, I my sense of it is that it's strategic, not but it's got to be cohesive. It's got to be supportive of what the platform stands for. I definitely feel that.
Yes, and it wasn't intentional at the time I started it, but as I started the process, I was like, oh, okay, if I'm going to bring vendors in, it can't just be anything. The same way that there isn't any and every sponsor left, right, and center. But that leads to your question of being like, what is the plan? So the hope would be to have it become a 2-day experience where brunch will still be its own entity of just brunch the same way it's not attached to London Ivy or anything, but having a day before the Saturday be like a whole day of learning. And that could be the space where we're able to bring in more sponsors and bring in more things to help elevate our community. So having 2 streams of the people that are more in a position than me of wanting to scale, and then the people that are just trying to get started.
So let's talk about the other brand, London Ivy. Tell me about London Ivy and why you started it.
That also came out of Nipissing. Because I did not want to keep driving from North Bay, or not even driving, okay, because I didn't bring my car in the beginning to university. So I was going to have to take the Northlander, because that was the only real bus that went there, down to Toronto, get my car, drive to Buffalo to get one of 3 or 4 brands that were in like the beauty supply stores there. And not even Sally's and stuff. They didn't have stuff. You had to find like the little back corner beauty supply stores that were owned by Black women, and then pick up whatever it is you're going for, and then find myself back in North Bay, which is like 3.5 hours from Toronto. So it was exhausting, to say the least, and expensive. Yeah. So I then got these students that were in the chemistry program that liked their token Black girl and wanted to be close to me to teach me how to make conditioner, and that was the first step. And then from there, everything else.
You went to some chemist students at your university and learned how to make the conditioner yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was just like, oh, I want to know how to do this thing. So yeah.
So it started with conditioner.
Yes, and then once you know the basic cosmetic standards of that, you can make almost anything else. So it was just becoming, okay, what are the principles for this thing? What are the principles for that thing? All the percentages, etc., and then just making all the other pieces.
So you're actually like actively involved in the formulation of all
everything.
Your products. Yeah. Oh wow! So this is not just a farmed out.
Oh no.
Conditional
we actually private label for other people.
Oh wow! Yeah. And so how does it go from you're with these people at university, they're teaching you how to make conditioner, to this is a business that I could grow it into?
Then I decided I wanted to grow my hair out, because that was the whole thing about like 11 years ago, where everyone needed to have like waist length hair. So I had all my hair and I was like growing it out, and then everyone wanted to know how my hair was like down past my bra, and I was like, okay, well this is what I'm using at home.
That was the line, right?
Yes.
If your hair was past your bra,
then you were an expert somehow, and it's like, well, I just take care of my hair. If you do it too, we can all be. And it was exhausting anyway, so I now don't let my hair grow much longer than this, because it took a long time to wash my hair all the time and detangle it and go through the styling process, etc. Yeah. So yeah, just people seeing it, wanting it too, and then being like, oh, this is what I make, and then yeah.
And how did you come up with the name? Why London Ivy?
It wasn't called London Ivy before. It was called Curls with Care.
Okay.
And then I wanted to introduce skincare because I was pregnant, and I was like, oh, my skin's all messed up now. And I'd never had acne as a child, but now I was developing this. And I was like, there has to be something in that realm. Let's figure it out. So I decided, while pregnant, gonna do this, and I'm gonna name it after whatever comes out. So we chose 2 names of like girl or boy. So London Ivy just sounds better, and I'm glad she was a girl, because it would have been a slightly different line if it had been the other name. So yeah, it was just that. And then the name itself, London, as you know, is my last name. And then Ivy is my grandmother's first name. So, well, part of her first name. So I just took that and named London Ivy my daughter, and then was like, here we go. We're going to rebrand this.
How old is your daughter?
She's 5 now.
Does she get it that this brand, there's a brand that exists in the world that is named after her?
I don't think she understands the concept of brand per se, but she knows like the product. So she knows that there's customers. She knows that there's products. She knows she knew how to read her name fairly early just out of that, and just is able to associate the fact of like someone will say London Ivy, and she has to take a moment to be like, oh, are they talking to me or
the brand, or is it me?
Like, so that kind of is funny. And then it's a weird mind game, because people will call me London Ivy sometimes, and I'm like, what? No, that's not my name. There's an entire human being with that name, and I'd like her to be able to claim it. So it's like going through this space now, being like, should I have done that? Because now I kind of own her name, and what if she wants to use it for something? So yeah, but she appreciates it, she understands it, but she's still only 5, so we'll see as she keeps growing.
So it's an incredibly competitive industry that you're in. Like, what do you see? What are the biggest challenges that you have being in this industry?
I think myself more so, that I just wasn't putting in enough effort. Like when everything gets stripped away and I think of all the reasons why and I was doing this and doing that, whatever, that it still comes down to the fact that I just haven't put in enough effort. I do enough that I'm fortunate I have a partner, everything, London has a father, so I'm not of any need, so that I do enough to be able to afford the life that I'd like, but not anything more than that. And that's where we've hit this year of being like, okay, it's time to like, London understands more. You can't use that as an excuse. She's in school now. You have more time, not much more, but more time. So it's like, you got to do this. So that's where now it's like, okay, there is more in this if you just like put a little bit more effort in. And like, that doesn't mean I didn't have any effort, but there's that difference between the 5 figures and the 6 figure is that little bit more. And then between the person from there, it's just having all your systems in place. And that I'm fortunate from the life before this that I knew how to have that. So that was not the problem. And I know I can scale past it, but it's just do enough work that when you get there, you can be happy there and you're not struggling and drowning. So
what's your big dream for the brand?
It's ever evolving, where there's always the thought of like, oh, an exit would be great. And then trying to decide if I exit, how do you structure that where London can still make sure she has her name and stuff. And I know that I'd like to grow enough to be able to build up my community, having enough other young Black women work for me, etc. But I don't know if I want to necessarily deal with all the hassles that come from being in a Target, etc., until I at least have built a brand that's big enough to demand the things that will keep me from being there, almost like an employee. I noticed from some of the bigger brands that I've been able to build relationships with, where they almost become versions of employees for them by not having to abide by all the rules and regulations that they set, versus there's a couple others that can be like, no, this is what you get. And so that would be the thing. If I can break over that threshold where I can decide, great. If not, just keep building it online, local Black-owned salons, etc., and just like build up our community. So,
what are you most proud of having achieved with London Ivy?
The person or the products?
The product. Let's talk about the products first. Then we'll come to the person.
So with the products, gosh, I'll say 2 things. So one, that it's afforded me the ability to do brunch, which I never would have thought beforehand. But now that it's become its own living, breathing entity, I am blessed to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's only fortunate because my primary source of income is London Ivy products. And then the second part would be every time you get this mess, and it's always when you feel discouraged, right? Where you're like, why am I doing this? I got to do something else with my time, something that takes up less of my time. And then you'll get a message from someone being like, oh my gosh, my skin is so good. And like, I got this promotion, or now I'm out here in the world and stuff like that. And you're just like, okay.
This is why
tomorrow I gotta get
this.
up and do it again, so those would be the 2 things.
And one of the things that you definitely talk about, and you definitely is very apparent on the website, is that it's very focused on natural and organic. Like, why was that important to you?
Well, you know what? The real portion of that is that it is easier.
Let's get real, Monique.
It is easier and cheaper. Like people think
have
that
natural and organic?
because in the scale so some of the products now I'm at the scale where we can do more and build more and do like lab testing and all that stuff, but it's just a lot easier because in the like large scale weight shipments that I'd have to order of the ingredients that make them so cheap for L'Oreal and the rest of them, wild money for young Black women to come out and create without funders, etc. Just like wild money that they want you to spend in order to just have the minimum order, and then you got to make everything, produce everything, ship it, etc. So it was just easier to be like, stuff I can find, that I can pronounce, that I can read, that I can use, make.
See, that blows my mind, because the way that my interpretation of the beauty industry is that, it must be so much more costly to make the natural and organic products, because when they're sold to us by the big names, there's a massive uplift on those. So you're like, it must be more expensive for them to make it.
It's more expensive for us, as smaller businesses, because we can't get access to the rest of it. So it costs a lot more for all the natural ingredients, period. It costs more. But those big companies could do better because they have the buying power. right? It's like McDonald's now has apple slices. Let's just put it that way, right? Like the fact that they're not just selling fries, that they're like, we can buy an orchard and give you guys some apple slices. Right. And all the rest of the large companies could do the same thing. But a business is meant to make money, whether we like it or not. That is its mandate, that's its purpose. So they're gonna always find the cheapest, best way to do that. And for a lot of the big companies, they'll just change the ingredient listing on the back. And then now it's more natural because the 5 things that are at the bottom are now at the top. But either way, there's less than 1% of all of it. And you know, because once you read the one that is a specific chemical, you know you can't put more than that percentage in any product. So it doesn't matter what order you put them in, they're still basically nothing. But
do you find yourself going around, like when you go to whatever, the drugstore, reading the labels and be like, giving side-eye to all these brands?
I think in the beginning.
Most of us don't know. Like when it says whatever, sodium laureate or whatever, I don't know what that means, but you do. So do you like read?
In the beginning I did that, but that was more out of like the competition mindset of being like, oh my gosh, like they're selling so many of these and like, but this is garbage. Why are people buying this, etc. And then eventually it was like, I know what I provide. I know what it does. I know how well it works. I can't spend so much time looking at everybody else.
So what brings you joy?
Oh boy. Right now I'm in this space of trying to find what that looks like now, because so many other parts of my life have shifted that there's, of course, my daughter, period. A hug from her at any given point, and they always know. Like, children are the best judges of character, judges of space, time, value. They just know. Where I'll just be sitting there thinking about something, and she's like, oh, I love you, Mommy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why me? I'm so special. And then there's the other parts of my life that I'm trying to move in between, because there was almost a grieving period that had to happen in motherhood, and then there was like grieving my life before then where I could pick up and travel anytime I wanted, and then just shifting that part of my mind, being like, oh, well, now I don't just get up and go by myself, but I'm able to afford, my child's been so many places. Like I've been so fortunate through London Project to be all over the United States, Canada, etc. And she has been able to come along with me for that. So there's just a shifting of perspective that's been going through my life now, being like, okay, so what are these new things that you didn't realize you had joy in because you were so busy worrying about all the things you were doing before that you can't do now, versus looking at all the things you're doing now. So
as an outsider looking in, obviously like don't know you, but my sense of you, just based on my limited interactions with you and then also at the brunch, is that there seems to be a lot of intentionality in your life. Like you're intentional about how you're moving through life. You're intentional about what you bring into your life. And is that something that's
yeah. And that is great for the people on the outside, but not always with everything on the inside. So it's just been this whole process of like growth and relearning and unlearning a lot of stuff about who I am and the universe and how I'm seen in the world. So it's an interesting journey of being like, okay, this is who you are now, and what do you love still? And there's still fundamentals that like bring me to any ocean and you will find the happiest version of Monique, period. There's no other version of me that will ever hit a height of Monique sitting in front of the ocean. And that's not even beachwear, lounging, whatever, but just seeing the vastness of the universe and its depth. Like there's nothing more spectacular than the ocean. The whole fact that there's a whole other world happening below you when you can't see it is just spectacular. And I haven't been fortunate enough to do the rainforest because that might change my view of the ocean. But as it stands, that's the easiest place for me to get to at any given point. And you can always, no ocean line will ever be the same. Right? And there's something to be said about the way that the world has been made, whether you believe in God or just the universe, whatever space you come from, there's nobody in the world can deny the power of the ocean.
And so you talked about unlearning, that I've had to do unlearning. What's the biggest unlearning you've had to do?
Oh boy, the biggest. I don't know how I can quantify one as the biggest, because they've all come with different shifts. Mm-hmm. So it's like at any given time, that particular one would have felt like the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. The most recent would be learning how to give up all of the expectations I set on myself. So just being like, and on the unlearning was realizing that many of them weren't ones I actually self-imposed. They're just ones that I held onto because I thought I was supposed to. So it's just this whole space of being, there's so many of us, especially that are more unique to being like, second or third generation anywhere in the world, where you're not bound to all the things that if you had been born wherever your family had come from, but you are because they brought it with them. So trying to navigate the world of being like, hey, I live with all these people, but not getting lost in all these people, because you find yourself being like, let's just take, like, we'll say brought up C, right? Like that's the easiest one for most Caribbean people and African people to understand. And for anyone that doesn't know what brought up C is, that just means your mannerisms, how you go through the world with other people.
What your mama told you about this, how you behave.
So brought up C would be like the easiest one to use, because there are times where I'm like, oh, it's so simple. Like, why doesn't someone just do this thing? And I have to be like, oh, okay. You may not do that thing because no one taught you brought up C. And then I'm like, wait, but what is brought up C? Who brought in this concept to us that this is the way this thing should be done? And why does it only seem to affect Black people and Black people of the Caribbean or African descent? And I recognize in that unlearning that it's because it was imposed on us. And then trying to figure out, how do you go through the world as a Black woman and still excel without having to constantly be thinking about how you're moving through the world as a Black woman. So there are now so many conversations with like women we love, like Vivian, and I don't know if you know another woman named Denise. She goes by Change Denise on Instagram, where for her, she had her partner who happened to be a white male be like, you need to move through the world different. All of his peers are moving through the world this way. Why are you shrinking? And like shrinking doesn't always just mean by not doing enough, but sometimes by just not saying enough, right? Not being vocal about what it is you want. And that's with our relationships, with our children, with our work, everything. So that was one of the current transformations, being like, hey, how do I want to be seen? Why do I feel I need to behave this way when I'm going to a supplier or having a supplier meeting or a phone call versus when I'm doing this? And it's like, no, my money is still, I would say green because that's the colloquialism, but it's like red and brown and green and blue. But my money still works the same way, and especially when it's digital, because that's how you see it. They don't see cash, they just swipe, and it's like, well, I still got to pay that the same way that John or Chad, as Vivian would say, would. John has always been mine. John has always been the name I use, but then she said Chad. I'm like, Chad sounds a little more funky. We'll use Chad. So Chad is going through the world, right? We have to figure out how to be ourselves, work as a community, as Black women, as Black men, supporting Black men, but at the same time doing more uplifting of ourselves. Because the more, and that came through as well, motherhood, being like, hey, how am I leading the world right now for London to come up? What does she see in me? What are the characteristics? What life am I leading for her to come up and lead? Because I don't need her to be a carbon copy of me, by no means. I've never been that person. I don't think that she needs to run London Ivy or anything of the sort. But I do need to know that the basic human principles and qualities that I hope to strive to always exemplify, she able to come up and do. So that's kind of the...
Have you found, what's your experience been, because you talked about us empowering ourselves and each other. Yes. What's your experience been with that? Are we doing a good job as Black women of supporting each other, of lifting each other up?
I would say it's a hard space to be in, because clearly Black women support Black women. Brunch, yes, an example. London Ivy Products, another example. There are any one of the Black-owned competitors I have, Black women are base. That's it. That's who puts 90% of our money in our pocket. That's who we service. But there is also the other part of unlearning that we have to do, where we're told the same way that I don't share a lot about myself, right? So that came from the argument of like, you don't tell people your business. Why do people need to know what's going on in your life? And it's like, oh, well, if you don't tell anyone your business, how is anybody supposed to help you with it? You have to figure out how to do that. But by not telling anyone our business, it develops so much distrust, and that constant battle within ourselves, especially as Black women, being like, oh, well, if I tell her, she's going to tell everybody else, and what's going to happen here? Are they going to go and steal our idea? Are they going to, all that stuff. And it's just trying to create a world where women understand that, like, nobody else really worries, well, I can't say nobody, but not as many other places worry about that the way that we do. But it's so deeply ingrained in us of beling like, don't talk.
I mean, we're brought up, like, don't, because it's considered showing off.
Yes.
If you tell other people, this is what I'm doing, and so it's perfect what you said earlier about we shrink ourselves,
yes.
right? So we're achieving these great things, we're doing great things, but we don't tell anybody, and because, well, I don't want to be showing off, which
yes.
then kind of perpetuates itself, because then no one knows what you're doing, so they can't
yes.
support you, right? So
yes.
whereas, as Vivian would say, Chad is out there in the world telling everybody, like, he's done this much and he's telling everybody, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do we get over that fear of saying what we're doing?
I would say, well, the first step is always just to talk, right? No matter what the thing is, it's just to talk about it. But I think the second part of that is hopefully there will be more spaces that are similar to brunch that are created where women feel empowered to do that, where they're being celebrated, understood that it's not me or you, it can be both of us. Like, there are so many people that are constantly like, anytime somebody's starting a new skincare and they ask me and I answer a question that they have, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you answered that. I'm like, why? Like, the information's there in my brain. What difference does it make if I tell you or not? Like, you're not me. Like, you're not, unless you're gonna literally verbatim copy everything on my website, then we have a problem. But if not, go do on to the world, because the more of us that there are less of them that there are taking our money. Like, so
that is definitely a mindset shift, I think, for us as particularly as Black women. I think that is something that we. So what's your big dream outside of London Ivy the person, London Ivy the brand, Black Beauty Brunch? Who is Monique? What's Monique's big dream, and what is it that lights you up?
I would say it always has been the concept of community building. So I'd feel, for me, it's the after point of like, how do I want people to talk about me when I'm not in the room? What is it that I'd like them to be thinking about saying, and how do they share me with the world? And that is more what I've been trying to focus on in that space of being like, okay, you're here, you're doing all this stuff for people, but make sure that the people that you're doing it for know it, so that it's not just this feeling of thanklessness. And that works even in my personal life, being like, my partner being like, did you see that I did all that stuff over there? Like, that didn't just happen. And like being more vocal in sharing all the things we're doing, but not in the space of like, praise me, like now do this thing for me or that thing for me, but just in standing firm in the fact that I did that thing though. Like, you don't need to buy me anything, give me a gift, you know, do all that stuff, but you need to know that I did it because it took time, effort, energy, expertise to do this thing for you. So just know it, what you do with that information, great. But the second part to that is being like, hey, but I did this for all these other people. Tell people about it, so that both you'll know that those people are valuable, so that you'll come in and give your money to them, work with them, etc. But then also so that you can understand that these voices are meant to be heard and not just in the rooms that I create for them. So
what's the biggest, so you talked about London and how you want her to be, as you know, as she observes you in the world. What's your biggest dream for London the person?
Oh boy, to not be stifled by all the preconceived notions and stuff that we have to fight through. And just, my hope is that I'm doing a good job of not overbearing her, but still like parenting her. So that's more a me thing. So my hope for her is that when she comes up, she doesn't worry about mom, if that makes sense, right? Because like we're in the shift where there's so many more older people, they had more children, etc. I, as it stands, only have the one, and I want to leave the world where she's not worried about me. Might miss me, but she can like live, do whatever she needs to do, make money whatever way she wants to make it, and just be happy without stress that we carrying on our shoulders. So yeah.
So I told you about how much of an inspiration you are to me, just based on my interactions with you and just watching you as you move through the world? And I know based on, you heard the women at the brunch and all the beautiful things they had to say about you. And I want to know, what advice would you give to women, us as Black women?
Oh boy, that's so big.
I know.
There's so many women, so many
different things.
What would I say?
Let me narrow it down and say you're an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur and you're a mom. What advice would you give to somebody who looks at you and says, "Oh wow, she started this brand. She's doing her thing in the world." What advice would you give to someone who looks at you and has a dream of entrepreneurship?
I would say to start, but start well. And when I say well, I mean well within yourself. Like, do whatever work you need to do to be whole. Right? Like, that's the general concept of no one's ever going to be at this place, this magical utopia right away. Like, you're not just going to be perfect. You're constantly going to be battling with yourself and with others, with the changes that you're making. And the biggest problems you'll have are with people not catching up to you at the same time. So whether that's your family, your friends, whatever, while you're making these shifts in your perspective, they may not all be there, and trying to welcome them into that space but not go backwards. So I would just say to be as well as you can be, so that when you're putting anything out into the world, you're confident in it.
And that's a hard space for many of us. We struggle because there is that concept of leaving people behind, and if I change, then will they still love me? Will they still, will I still be accepted? How do we get past that?
For everyone, it's a little different. Some people are therapy. For others, it's just the constant work. So journaling, writing, meditation, etc. And I think for the rest, it would just be probably doing it as a collective. So going into spaces and rooms where you are stretched. So you're going to be in a space that you don't think you deserve to be in, and being there anyways. So that you can now understand that you deserve to be anywhere you want to be. So. Yeah.
You truly are. And I just want to say on film, on camera, that I am so grateful for you. I truly am so grateful for you because,
I don't want to cry.
Like I said, you've created this space where, as Black women, we can come in a it's so welcoming. Like, that's from, as you said, how you designed it is exactly how it happens. From the minute you walk in, you're welcome, to when you take your photos by the photo booth, to when the women who are there, and just the energy in the room, because I'm such a big believer in energy.
Yes.
And the energy of the room is just so beautiful, beautiful. And I look forward to, like, when's she gonna announce the next brunch again?
I know, and that's always the other part of, like, so when's I'm like, I don't know, man, can I just, like, sleep? Like, I haven't done that in a week, like,
Yeah, and I know, like you said, I know it's an effort. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But, as I said, as I'm sure you heard for yourself, there were women weeping when people were
that was
speaking
hard.
And saying their thank yous, because you make us feel seen, which is an incredible thing, and I'm so grateful to you. So,
thank you for saying that, because that is the other part for most people, that they don't say it when they feel it, so the other person doesn't know. So thank you.
So, since you said you're sharing more of yourself on social, just in life, where can people find you?
So you can find me personally on Instagram at the Monique London, and then you'll find London Ivy Products. They're everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, LondonIvyProducts.com, and then Black Beauty Brunch the same, where it's Black Beauty Brunch, and then the website BlackBeautyBrunch.com. So Facebook, Instagram, the whole nine. Trying to be on Twitter more, but Facebook, Instagram the most.
And tell me about London Ivy Products. Where can people find them? And I know you ship. Like, where do you ship to?
We ship all over the world. They're flat rate shipping internationally, as well as for Canada and the US. They all have their own stuff. If you're in the US or around the world, you shop at LondonIvyProducts.com. And if you are in Canada, it's LondonIvyProducts.ca, so that you don't have to pay in US dollars.
And we love that. We love that you ship everywhere, so that we can all...
Yes, we got beauties all over the world.
Magic going. All right, last question. I promise, because I know you've been like, when's this girl going to be done?
Okay job.
Last question. So this platform, this whole everything that I'm doing is called Ndini.
Yes.
It's named after my mother is Shona. That's my mother tongue is Shona from Zimbabwe, and it means I am. And I really believe in the power of I am and how we all decide our own destiny. So finish the sentence for me. I am.
I am finding ways to move in the world with my presence constantly being seen.
I'm going to look for you to be seen more on social media is what I'm going to look for.
I'm trying.
Thank you, Monique.
Thank you.
Truly, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to do this. Thank you again for London Ivy, the brand. And I'm sure we thank you for London Ivy, the person too.
Right?
And thank you for Black Beauty Brunch for giving us a space where we can feel heard, we can feel seen, and we can have community as sisters.
Oh,
I love you. I love you. I love you. And I'm so grateful that we can finally do this.
Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for seeing